Hi, my name is Seth.
And I'm Youjin.
She's a German costume designer. I'm an American opera singer. We live in Berlin.
And we're having a baby during a pandemic.
Stick around for Seth Learn Dad. Well, after everything, here I am back in a dressing room. It's our first dress rehearsal for ELEKTRA in Cloggenfort. I'm so happy to be back at work. But now that we're off on this journey of being new parents, I just wanted to take a moment to look back at some of the things that came up while we were expecting our little boy. Of course, you know when you're going to have a kid, there are going to be new things to learn, but some things really catch you off guard. So I wanted to take a moment to look back at some of the surprises. For example, I knew I would have to buy a bunch of new stuff, but I didn't think about the boxes. All the cardboard. So much cardboard. I also had no idea that evidently I walk way too fast.
Can we slow down a little bit?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Can we slow down?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Slow down, speed racer.
Sorry. And due to toxoplasmosis, a pregnant woman cannot get anywhere near a cat litter box. So that meant that I had to take care of that every single day. "38 weeks of this every day. It's hard being a man." When Youjin told me she wanted to buy a new body pillow to help support her while she's sleeping while pregnant, I thought, oh, that's a great idea, but I had no idea that I was going to be completely replaced. So much so that we now refer to that body pillow as her boyfriend. I also had no idea that remembering to take prenatal vitamins is a two-person job. Did you take your pills?
Yep.
Have you taken your pills?
Yep.
Hey, have you taken your pills? Yes. Have you taken your pills? Have you taken your pills?
No.
Have you taken your pills?
Yes.
Yeah. Go. Let's see it. Oh man, there's just so many things to learn every day. Just when you think you've mastered one part of the process, then everything changes and you have something new. And I love every minute of it. I wouldn't change anything. I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Yeah, I mean that's the advantage of Elektra. Unless you're actually singing Elektra, you have a really intense scene, but then you've got like nothing else to do.
Yeah, and that's also just the benefit
Yeah.
of doing a piece without a chorus and without intermission. So we don't really have to change much, I guess, for the hygiene measures, which hopefully. I mean, we don't have to alter the piece itself,
No, that's right. We'll just have to work out how we, the orchestra is going to now be on stage, and what was initially conceived as like a semi-staged performance, I think they're actually going to try and stage it, but just in like a confined space. And the set designers come up with a completely new concept, which could be quite fascinating. I mean, it just means that you guys will be closer to the audience than you otherwise would be, because you'll be standing on where the orchestra pit is. So, I mean, we'll have to play it safe with the how much spray comes out when you're singing, for example.
Sure. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking to Bianca Muggleton and Nicholas Carter. Bianca is a baroque violinist, and Nick is a conductor. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Let's start off with the age-old question. Where are you guys from?
Well, we're both from Australia, from Melbourne in Australia. We both studied there together at Melbourne University. That's where we met each other. We were in the same year, started in 2004. And we've then been in Europe for about 10 years now.
What were you studying when you were in Melbourne?
I was studying normal violin. Nick was studying piano, doing our bachelor together. And we were best friends for a couple of years and then became more than that.
Upgraded.
Upgraded. How did that happen? How did you go from best friends to more than that?
We had very similar sorts of outlooks on life, and also, putting perhaps to this discussion, outlooks on family. We just realized that there were a whole bunch of things that seemed to be so, we could take a whole bunch of things for granted. There wasn't any need to convince one or the other of, the want to have children or things like that. We both had very similar ideas, ideas of how we wanted, both to have 2 kids.
Having 2 years of courtship.
Yeah.
2 years of flirting to begin with. Then by the time we got together, we knew each other pretty well.
So you said that, Nick, your primary instrument was piano.
Well, actually, at university it was singing, and then piano was my secondary. So I did my bachelor degree as a singer, as a baritone, and I'd studied violin at school as well, and piano I did as my secondary instrument at uni. Yeah.
Okay. And Bianca, you said that your primary you studied in school normal violin. Tell me about what do you mean by normal, and are you no longer playing normal violin? What does that mean?
Actually not. I studied normal violin, modern violin in my bachelor, and while I was doing that, I got interested in trying out a baroque violin because I'd read about them and heard recordings, but I'd never actually touched one. And I found out you could borrow them from the university, so I borrowed one, and we formed a small baroque orchestra with other students who were just interested in trying it out. And then I just did that sort of on the side for a few years and moved over to Germany to just learn German to begin with and be an au pair for a year. And I met a baroque violin teacher at the university in Cologne, and I then went and bought myself a baroque bow in Paris, and then this teacher lent me a violin, and it all just kind of fell into place. The more you learn about something, the more interested you become in it, and I just wanted to go further and further and further along that path, and I really haven't played modern violin since then. So that's over 10 years now. Yeah,
so how does one decide that they want to go from studying singing and piano and violin to becoming a conductor? I don't think many people know about what that path is like.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I decided to study singing, it wasn't because I wanted to become a singer. I never had ambitions to become an opera singer, basically because I knew that I didn't sound like Bryn Terfel. Therefore, I thought there's no point. Either I sound like Bryn Terfel or I'll do something else. And I'd always wanted to be a conductor from a disturbingly young age, like 10 or 11, way before you even know what the hell being a conductor is or what a conductor actually does. But for some reason I was transfixed by this. It was the complete package that really appealed to me. I didn't want to simply just do one instrument or the other. I liked being needing to kind of be on top of everything, and perhaps that's simply because I didn't come from a musical family, from a family which had sort of any knowledge of this repertoire and of this music. So I just sort of thought, okay, in for a penny, in for a pound. I want to know everything that there is to know about it.
Wow, it's funny. I was thinking it kind of sounds like your early childhood plan and goals are similar to that of like an evil genius in like a James Bond villain type way. Like you said, at 10 years old, I'm going to take over the world.
Well, I'm certainly not a genius, but I am evil.
So you guys moved to Europe together?
Well, we didn't move to Europe together. Nick sort of
set it all up.
Lined me up with a job in Germany.
Oh, okay.
Well, he lined himself a job up in Sydney. So then we were we'd been together for 3 years, and then we were going to be about a year apart. But the weirdest was that I had never seen where Nick was living in Sydney, or met a lot of his friends or his colleagues, anything, and he had never seen where I was living.
But then
we slowly worked our way together. Then Nick, after Sydney, got a job in Hamburg and moved up there. And at that stage, I was studying. After I finished my au pair year, I started studying in Cologne. And then after I finished my studies in Cologne, then I moved up to Hamburg to be with Nick. So then we got married that summer and moved in together for a few months before I then moved to Italy for another 6 months to do a bit more study, because I got this scholarship that I couldn't say no to. So when Nick got the position at the Deutsche Oper in Berlin, then we both made our first move together to a city.
Yeah. And then shortly after, that's then when we had Claudia.
Yeah.
Also when you got pregnant.
Yeah.
So we had Claudia. So that was 2014-15.
Wow, it's good that you guys don't have codependence issues. That's a lot of time apart. Yeah. So when you had Claudia, then
it kind of proved to us that we were doing the right thing.
So then when you had Claudia, like, what made you think that was the right time to go ahead and have a child?
Well, one bit of advice, I don't know if it's advice or just something that somebody had once said to us, I forget even who it was. They said it's often good to not think of having a child as having a child at the right time or the wrong time. Just simply say to yourself, there's never a better time to have a child. And I think that's really very good for also people in our career, because it completely depends on everybody's own circumstance, their own situation.
But for us, it certainly was a wrong time to have a child, and that was when we were just always living in different cities, different continents, different countries, different cities, and then finally we're both living in the same city. So
yeah, but it's easier to sort of say, okay, you can say, okay, no, we're going to have kids in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And think it'll be easier then, or it'll be better than if we do it then, or it would have been better if we'd done that. There's never a better time to do it. Once you've decided that it's the right thing for you to do, then that's the perfect time.
Mm.
You have 2 children, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Claudia's going to turn 5 in October, and Atticus just turned 2 about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So where did Atticus come into your path here?
We were still in Berlin. It was the end of our Berlin time, and we'd spent a summer in Santa Fe at the opera festival there. Claudia would have been like 2.5 or something.
No, she was almost 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah, that's right. So she was almost 2 in the summer of 2017.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, like, again, now is probably a good time, so that there's still, an age similarity between the two of them. 2 to 3 years is always really good, so that they can, play with each other in the not too distant future. And we had the job offer of Cloggenfort, where I am now as the chief conductor. That was certainly on the cards. That was on the horizon, and we thought, okay, well, maybe this is the sort of place where it's nice to sort of turn the family of 3 into a family of 4. It's a beautiful place down here in southern Austria. It's a very small city or a very large village.
Well, that's good to hear, because that will be the first place that we travel as 3. So it's good to hear that it's a good place. So Nick, you're mostly, you have a music director position, but Bianca, you work exclusively as a freelancer, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of challenges arise from being a parent and a freelancer in your experience?
In the beginning, the idea of being a freelancer with Nick's career seemed completely compatible, because it didn't matter where we were moving every 3 years. I could just continue to travel from wherever we lived, and that's what I'd been doing, and that worked. And then we had Claire, and the biggest challenge was just logistics with each gig, because it was usually traveling for gigs, and even when it wasn't, there was still a question of babysitters. I think Nick was only around for 1 gig and came with me to look after Claudia on one concert. The rest, he was always on the road as well. So there was one time when I had to get a friend, Siobhan, to come with me. She looked after Claudia while I had concerts somewhere in Germany. And then she flew back to Berlin. And then I took Claudia down to Italy. And then I had to find someone in Italy to look after Claudia. And then we flew to, or then another time, then we flew to Turkey, to Istanbul, and I had to fly someone in from another city in Turkey who had looked after someone else's children that I
Friends
knew.
of friends.
Yeah, and she flew in and looked after Claudia for a couple of nights, and then from there we flew back to Berlin, or I flew back to Berlin with Claudia. We packed our bags and we flew off to America, to Santa Fe, to meet Nick. But with one kid, I just strapped her to me, and
She was small enough.
yeah, she was adaptable. She was small enough. As long as I was there for her to sleep with, it didn't matter where we were. It was just finding someone to look after her each time. You know, a matter of weeks makes a big difference to a small child. So you can't really tell what she's going to be like in 3 months' time or 2 months' time. So I just say yes to everything and then work it out afterwards. But then the challenges after we moved to Klagenfurt were different, because this was suddenly we're in a new country, and 5 weeks after we moved here, Atticus was born. And so, of course, he didn't have a passport for about 6 months while we had to work out the citizenship and all of that. And I couldn't really travel anywhere with him. And I was breastfeeding, so I had to take him with me, and I had no contacts in Austria. So suddenly it hit me that this life of just being a freelancer and picking up from where I left off in whatever city, it doesn't work that easily when it involves international moves. And having 2 kids, suddenly the logistics just became too much of a headache that I decided to not even think about it for a while. I just took the time off to focus on home and focus on the 2 kids. And that was a blessing. Being in a completely different place also helped, because I wasn't aware constantly of what all my colleagues and friends were all doing, and feeling like I wasn't, wasn't joining in. And that's also hard when you're just stuck at home. But being in a completely different place helped, and not having that stress of thinking that I need to quickly get back in, or I'm going to lose my spot in that orchestra or that orchestra. Yeah, it just took a whole pressure off that I didn't need then. I had time to just enjoy a quieter life.
My position in Adelaide with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra was principal conductor. So basically I went out and spent 8 or 9 weeks a year. I think at the most was maybe 10 or 11, and at the least it was maybe 6 or 7.
Not all at once.
And of course, not at once. So sometimes I'd fly out for, these are in the olden days when you'd fly to another country for a 1 week period and then turn around and fly back. And sometimes I'd fly there for maybe 2 weeks and do 2 projects and then fly back. But basically, my life was here in Klagenfurt, which is really great, because it means that, you've got sort of the bit of the boring day-to-day life routine, which really appeals to me, waking up, going to work, and then coming back from work, rather than just always being in an airport and always flying to a different city, to a different country or continent every week or every 2 weeks.
Each time he'd go away, I would be super organized, and I'd make sure I had lots of meals already cooked and just take out as much pressure as I could. But every time it was slightly different, because the kids were slightly different ages, and there was no real way of planning for these periods away. They always worked out. There was never any problem.
Did you mostly stay in Cloggenfort, or did you take the opportunity to get home to Australia sometimes, or was that too difficult of a logistical nightmare?
We try and go back to Australia about once a year. Nick tries to line up a few things together, so he has at least 3 or 4 weeks there, and we all go back with him. And we've managed that each year till now. And that works out really well. Then we go and stay with my parents for about a month at a time. Now I don't know what's going to happen, obviously. It is a bit of a logistical nightmare, but it's always worth it. We always think when we're on the plane, never again. And then as soon as we get there and we're with family, it was worth every second on the plane.
Do you have any practical advice for traveling with a baby?
Yeah. Tie strings for all the toys on the airplane. If you can breastfeed the baby, that's the first helpful thing for flying. And
But also at that age, he or she is not going to want to get up and walk around the airplane, which is obviously what a 2-year-old wants to do. Instead of getting a 2-year-old to sit still is the most difficult thing. But this idea of tying strings to the toys and then tie the other end to like
to yourself or
to the belt or something, because it's so easy to lose.
They just throw the toys, everything falls on the floor, everything. So you want toys that are interesting and fun that can be just attached to you.
You mentioned earlier talking about having to get citizenship issues. What are you able to get dual citizenship for your children, or because you're both Australian, maybe you can't? I don't know. How does that work?
Yeah, so we've both got Australian, and then I've also got Irish ancestry, and therefore Irish citizenship and an Irish passport, which means that working in the EU is obviously not a problem. Bianca's on a spousal visa. Doesn't have her own Irish passport, but working and living here is no problem as well. Yeah.
When Clyde was 5 months old, we took her to Australia, and we organised the Australian citizenship and then the Australian passport because we knew we were travelling to Australia soon. But then when we were leaving Europe or entering Australia, I can't remember, they said this is going to be a big problem. She doesn't have a visa for Germany, so you're not going to be able to get back in for some reason. So this caused us lots of stress because she's technically eligible for Irish, but she didn't have it yet. We managed to get through, and they just gave us a warning and said you have to sort that out. So then with Atticus, we thought, okay, we'll get the Irish citizenship first so that there's no issues with him being here. And we sorted that out. Then we were working on the Australian one, but it was going to take a long time to come through, and it was getting close to when we were actually traveling to Australia. So we thought, we'll just get a visa for him for now, and we'll deal with the citizenship when we get back. And so then by the time we got back from Australia, his photo was over 6 months old, and the application is now out of date, and we had to start the whole process again. And I just couldn't be bothered. So now we're working he's already 2 years old, and we're already now we're working on getting him the Australian citizenship and passport, but it seems to be this never-ending process.
Well, and then you're going to have to add the paperwork of moving to Switzerland on top of all that too.
Yeah,
that's not fun. We're just not thinking about that just yet.
Okay.
Every move requires sort of bureaucratic nightmare, and yeah, it takes years to work out what is required and what you need to do for each thing. And when you only move into a place for a few years, you just spend your whole time trying to work out. For example, in Germany, we spent a long time working out all the government help money, I don't know what you call it in English, for having children.
Right.
You get family money and you get child money, and we spent a long time working that out. And we went to places where they give free advice, and hospitals gave free advice, and I went to lots of information sessions and worked it all out and sorted it, and then we left. And then we arrived in Austria, and we
kind of assuming that it would be similar.
Yeah.
But it turned out to...
There are all these things that nobody tells you about, and then we tried to read all the forms for the child allowance, and we couldn't understand the language because it's technically German, but bureaucratic language changes from German-speaking country to German-speaking country, and we couldn't understand it, and we tried to get help from people that our midwife recommended, but they stopped answering us in the end, and we couldn't get through to them, and we just kind of gave up. And I'm sure we missed out on a lot of money there.
So we're eligible to a bit more of a government handout in that sense. The bureaucracy just got the better of us. And now we thought we'd just start living life again.
When you arrive somewhere new, you don't have any contacts, and you don't know where to find advice on filling things or what is even out there. It's when it gets a bit hard.
Yeah.
The one thing last that, because I'm raising my children, hopefully in a country other than where I grew up, and I'm thinking constantly about how I can keep them connected to where I come from. Do you have anything that you're doing or any plans to keep your kids connected to Australia while living in Europe?
We always tried to go back once a year, and both sets of parents have always tried to visit once a year as well. And because it's such a long way from Australia to Austria, when we make a trip, it's always for about a month or so. And then the time that the kids spend with their grandparents is really intense because it's a month of living with somebody. So that when we do speak on Skype or whatever every week, then they know them very, very well. It's not like somebody that they've visited a few times. It's someone they've lived with for a month. And so it makes it a lot easier. You know.
Those are most of the questions I have. I have one last bit of the interview, and that's my questionnaire that I'm asking to everybody. So we're going to jump right into this with question 1. I hope you're ready. What is the best piece of advice that anyone gave you, or the worst piece of advice anyone gave you? I'll take either or both.
I mean, one piece of a good piece of advice is to allow, and I forget who gave us, we discussed this with, but allow each parent to have their own parenting style, and that's a good thing to acknowledge and to be mature enough in the relationship that dad's going to do it differently from mum. You know, you're going to do things slightly differently from Youjin. I mean, there'll be moments where you might sort of see the way that she's handling a situation and think, I would do it differently. And there'll be moments where you're handling a situation and she'll think, I would do it differently. But it's also good for the child to be exposed to different styles of parenting as well. And don't allow things like that to become a thorn in the relationship.
Yeah, whatever you do, the child is going to have a different relationship with father and a different relationship with the mother. And I think that helps your own relationship as well, to not be stressed out by things happening in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And just sort of acknowledge that. And sometimes you'll see things and sort of say, yeah, actually, that is the right way to do things. I should sort of adapt more that way. And you might sort of it's important to be honest with yourself and realize, you know, maybe I'm overreacting here, or, you know, in trying to tame a tantrum, for example. You know, also getting stressed out by it, of course, doesn't work. So it's also good to learn from your partner as well.
So question 2 is, what did no one tell you about parenting that you wish that they had?
I think evolution has kind of evolution has provided parents with 9 months to come to terms with what's going to happen. Because surely, maybe you had this sensation after sort of 4 or 5 months, you sort of think, I want the baby now. You know, you're just so impatient. You just want to hold the baby. You want to start life. And then in maybe 2 or 3 months after that, you realize, actually, like I've matured myself, and I've learned so much about myself and ourselves and how we want to actually raise the child. And I've only learned that in the last month or two. So had the child come 3 months ago, I wouldn't have been ready. So this 9 months, and maybe the 9th month is what's so unbearable for so many people, because you sort of think that you are absolutely ready. But take every day to you know, reevaluate and relearn and restudy and rethink about how you're going to raise this child. And so that's I think in one sense, you think of anything great that could possibly happen, and also everything terrible that could possibly happen. And so that when the baby actually comes, you're ready. You are ready, even though you might not think you're ready. You're as ready as anybody else has been.
All right, question 3. What is the one toy or piece of equipment, distraction, whatever, that you absolutely couldn't have survived without?
The baby carrier with the pocket on the front, an ergo baby it's called, because that I could take everywhere. Baby was always happy in it. Yes, you could have the baby on the front, passports in the pocket, one hand for the suitcase, and then you've got an extra hand for violin or whatever you've got.
In terms of toys, I mean, it changes sometimes from week to week. So I mean,
Sure.
At the beginning, a dummy or pacifier. You know, you couldn't have done long flights without, or we couldn't have done them without that. And
question 4. It may be too soon for you guys to have an answer for this, or you may just be such nice people that you don't have an answer for this. But what did your parents do when you were a kid that you swore you would never do as a parent, but you ended up doing it anyway?
I definitely hear my mother's phrases come out of my mouth all the time. But I wouldn't say this that I swore I would never do. I just hear her voice coming out of me a lot.
You know, childhood vocabulary or vocabulary that you use with your children is passed on from generation to generation. It stays somehow saved in the hard drive.
People often have trouble speaking to a small child in the language they normally talk in if it's not their mother tongue. You notice that people always go back to their mother tongue when they're talking to a small child. For example, a German person speaking to our children when they were little didn't speak any German, but they would speak in German to our children, even if we all spoke in English, because that's the language that you speak to children in, your mother tongue. It's what you heard when you were a child, I think.
So the last question, question 5. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to change my first diaper. And I'm looking for tips and advice on how to do this. Just give me your technique. Give me whatever advice you have regarding changing a diaper. Sorry, a nappy. Excuse me, a nappy.
Yes,
a nappy, yeah. I'm not aware of being particularly
techniques.
Different schools of thought on this. Basically, you open it up, you hold your breath, you put on one of those costumes that who test the coronavirus. You know, those coronavirus tests, and you put on one of them so you're protected from everything and you don't have to breathe in. Yeah, the good thing is you're an opera singer as well, so you can take a big deep breath and hold it for a good minute or two. That's certainly helpful. And otherwise, you clean until it's clean, and then you put the next one on. Just enjoy the time until the baby starts eating solids, because it's only once the baby starts eating solids that the
poo stinks.
The poo really starts to stink.
Good. Well, guys, that's it. I know you have to go soon. I'm looking forward to seeing you in about a month, and I'm looking forward to meeting Atticus because I've never met him.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say that you feel particularly passionate about?
I just want to say that being flexible is the most important thing, not worrying about my biggest concerns were always when I thought, is what I'm doing now going to set a pattern or going to be, am I going to regret this later on? That was always my concern. But in the end, you're doing whatever you have to do right now. You don't think about later on, because thinking that you need to train a certain behavior, I think, is ridiculous. Some babies are more malleable than other babies, but you can't assume that you can train a behavior. You just have to cope with the behavior, and that goes right up until you have a toddler, that when they're behaving in a certain way, there's ways that you can help that child when they're going through tantrums, or there's ways that you can cope with it, find that, rather than ways you can change their behavior. And for tiny babies sleeping, you can't always train a baby to sleep certain hours. I don't know that you can ever do that. Some parents are lucky and some parents aren't. And for some parents, having a routine helps their baby. For others, it doesn't. And I think getting myself out of that mentality that I had to be careful I didn't disrupt this later on down the line, that what I did now might affect later on. It doesn't. It's just right now, in the moment, whatever helps you get through it, basically.
Yeah.
Confinement song number 1, dedicated to all the parents out there. They won, this is fun. There is cooking to be done. There is food for everyone, but it's still just day 1. I like this. Together, we are all in this together. Working all the time is over. This is everything and better.